Okay, everybody, welcome. My name is Michael Van Kleeck, and you are at my presentation on enterprise architecture and Astrolabe to guide innovation at Mozilla. A couple questions before I get started, just make sure you guys are in the right room. How many people, ladies and gentlemen, are in the right room? How many people are here to hear about enterprise architecture? Okay, how many people are here to hear about something like TOGAF or one of the enterprise architecture frameworks? There will be none of that, absolutely none of that. I have burned every framework I've ever seen. We use enterprise architecture very loosely. So if you're interested in the frameworks, if you believe in the frameworks, let me just tell you we're presenting you an alternative. How many people are here to hear about Mozilla? Awesome. Obviously, Mozilla is my favorite subject. It's where I work. I love being a part of Mozilla. And how many of you are here to hear about Astrolabes? Yes, well, I'll talk to you about it in a little bit, and I'll tell you where you can go see one. I always like to start my presentations with a little joke. So why did the Scarecrow win an award? Yes. Because he was outstanding in his field. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll be having comedy later on tonight. Since I am presenting here, I'm presenting at the O'Reilly conference, but I'm also presenting on behalf of Mozilla. Whenever I'm presenting on behalf of Mozilla, I consider myself part of the Mozilla Developer Roadshow. So just to lay out the ground rules real quick, every time we do anything with Mozilla, we have a code of conduct. We use this on all of our open source projects. We use this on all of our meetings. Those of you who are looking to open up or apply a code of conduct to any projects you're on would be well served to check out our code of conduct. You can, in the slides, you'll be able to click on the details, but the overarching theme here is that we want to present a friendly, safe, and welcoming environment to all, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, ability, age, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, or religion or lack thereof. So please be warm, be here as best you can, contribute in the way you can, participate in the way that you can, and be respectful of one another in the room. Understand that all of us are coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives. That's the Mozilla way. It's the way of the open web. So with that in mind, with our thank you very much. Yeah, it's very important to us. In fact, we had a big win with our code of conduct earlier this week. I can't remember the project now, but one of the major open source projects looking for a new code of conduct ended up writing a sort of single religion focused code of conduct, and we were able to reach out to them. It was SQLite, and we were able to reach out to them and say, hey, how about you take a look at our CPGs? Maybe they'll give you some information, and they've adopted ours as their code of conduct. So we encourage it. It's open. I think it's out on GitHub. More information here on the Dev Roadshow code of conduct. So with that in mind, let's dive into the meat of our presentation. Enterprise architecture as an astrolabe to innovation. I'm gonna take you on a journey of innovation that's guided by our tools, driven by our techniques, and ultimately, of course, conducted by our people. We're going to talk about who Mozilla is and why we have a need to innovate. We have a very strong need to innovate. In fact, I'm coming to you at a time when Mozilla is constantly an organization that's, we feel like we're under turmoil, and we're in a particular set of turmoil right now that the only way out is for us to innovate. So it's a good time, a relevant time for me to be talking about what we're doing. Where are we now? How do we know where we're at? Let's see what an enterprise architecture astrolabe could be that could show us where we're at and where we're going. And where do we want to go and how do we get there? We'll take you on that long trip. And just a little disclaimer here. As is normal for me when I do talks, this talk was proposed 4 or 5 months ago when we were looking at where we were going to be 4 or 5 months down the line. So I was trying to be kind of my own astrolabe, viewing where we'll be. We're in a lot different place. We didn't get to where I expected to be by today, and you'll see that as part of the talk. I'm going to be fully open here with where we're at, what's working, and how things are a little different from what I expected them to be for this talk. Start with, this is who I am, Michael Van Kleeck. I'm Mozilla's Enterprise Solutions Architect. As of now, that title will be changing. One of the things that's different here is we're basically abandoning enterprise architecture at Mozilla. Doesn't mean we're abandoning the principles of innovation that are captured in here. Doesn't mean abandoning the processes, but we're getting rid of that title and term. I live in Portland, Oregon, USA, fantastic city. Please come visit us. We have a seasonal nonstop from London, also from Amsterdam. There's a year-round nonstop from Iceland and from Frankfurt. Please come out to Portland. I became a professional programmer through O'Reilly Books, so I really enjoy that I get to present at O'Reilly conferences. I feel like it's come full circle 22 years later. I've spent, like I said, 22 years as a software engineer and architect. I consider myself a cartographer of the imagination, which means I map out things that we may not be able to actually get to just yet. So we're trying to sail our way there. Believe very strongly in the power of youth. I think nothing is more important in our business right now than bringing youth into this. We have a new generation. Those of us who, I've basically been in tech for a generation now, and I discovered the internet when I was, 17, 18, when I was in college, and I was lucky. It was kind of an early one. We now have a generation, a lot of people in here, in this room, who have known the internet ever since they were born and have a whole new set of ideas and way of thinking, and we need to be bringing those thoughts and those ideas and merging them with what we've learned from our experience so far. So I refresh every year by going to the Coachella Festival and rocking out with people that are everywhere from half my age to twice my age. I was an English major. I know it's kind of a long route to being a software engineer, but that's how we got there. A poet and a DJ, and I've been actually in London. I've DJ'd 3 sets while I've been here in this last week, plus given this presentation and another presentation a couple times. All right, so let's talk about Mozilla. Enough about me. Mozilla is, that's who I work for. You probably know us best from the Firefox web browser, but we are so much more than that. Overall, the number one thing about Mozilla is we are a mission-driven organization that our mission is to ensure that the internet is a global public resource, open and accessible to all, an internet that truly puts people first, where individuals can shape their own experience and are empowered, safe, and independent. And that mission is what drives everything we do. We don't have a mission to make a profit. There's one share in the Mozilla Corporation that's owned by the Mozilla Foundation, which is a nonprofit. So we're not out here to make some 10x amount of money. We're just trying to make enough money to sustain our efforts to keep the internet open. And we do that in a variety of ways. Obviously, Firefox, 350 million users worldwide. It's fast for good. We had a big push last year to improve our performance with Firefox 57 and Quantum. We're now a year into that. We thought that creating the world's fastest browser, we thought that's what the market wanted. We found out that the market just doesn't want a desktop browser, period. So even though we did all this effort to improve performance, we're not thinking that we could really stem our decreasing adoption. That didn't work. So that's why we're kind of at a phase now where we're like, well, what are we going to do now? The desktop's kind of shirking off a little bit. But we do a lot of other things other than the browser. We, MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network, which is the web docs that are now used by, they're referred to by Microsoft and I think by Google now as well. 10 million monthly users out there. We're doing mixed reality projects. We support the Rust language. We're all about making the internet better. We had MozFest last weekend. Did anybody go to MozFest? MozFest is out at Ravensbourne College. It's our annual festival of the internet. About 2,000 people attended. It's kind of our the big moment where we come together and get reinvigorated to keep our mission going. And ultimately, open source is our DNA. Everything that we do is out in the open. All the code we write, everything that we have internally, and our business model. We're here. I get to talk very openly to you about the challenges that we face in a way that you might not hear from a for-profit or shareholder-owned company, because we not only want our browser to manifest our mission, but we want our work to serve as a model for other organizations that want to be mission-driven. So we're not afraid to come out and tell you, hey, things are going great. Things aren't going great. I'll tell you, things are always going great at Mozilla, even though there's challenges at times. But with the browser sort of at its plateau right now, what are we going to do next to carry the mission forward? Well, we have to innovate. I know you keep hearing innovate all over out here, and I'm going to show you the process by which we're trying to innovate our way through. So, how do we know where we're at? That's where enterprise architecture as an Astrolabe comes in. It's a map of what we can do and where we want to go. Now remember I told you I'm an English major. I come from a little bit different background. I'm going to introduce a couple interesting concepts to you here just to get your mind thinking a little differently. You've probably been thinking a lot about code. I know we've been talking a lot about microservices. I went to an awesome presentation yesterday on chaos engineering. So let's soften that brain up a little bit. Yoko Ono's map piece. Draw an imaginary map. Put a mark on the map where you want to go. Go walking on an actual street according to your map. If there is no street where it should be, according to the map, make one by putting the obstacles aside. When you reach the goal, ask the name of the city and give flowers to the first person you meet. The map must be followed exactly or the event has to be dropped altogether. Ask your friends to write maps. Give your friends maps. Thanks, Yoko. Or Yoko's other map piece. Draw a map to get lost. And that's what we do a lot of times when we're drawing maps in architecture. We feel like we've got a direction, that we have a place we want to go. Sometimes those of us who are leading architectural efforts have this great vision, and we have this map of where we want to be, but people who try to follow it get lost because for one reason or another, they don't have the context to follow it, or we haven't given them, we show you a map, what good is a road map if you don't have a car? What good is a map of the stars if you don't have a spaceship? Too often we as architects draw these maps, but we're not aware of how people are going to navigate those journeys. So what's an astrolabe? Astrolabe is an astronomical instrument that's used. It can be used in 1,000 different ways. I forget who there was a medieval or 13th century astronomer, I think it was, who said you can do 1,000 things with an astrolabe. He probably listed them all out, but it's probably been lost to the ages. The astrolabe is basically, if you hold it in your hand, it's a set of discs with a pointer on the top and a little dial in the back that you can use to figure out. You have the rote, which is the pointer on the top, and the plates. The plates are kind of maps of the universe, and there'll be multiple plates stacked up to give you different views of the universe. The rote, which is the pointer, lets you tune in to see where particular stars will be at a given time. On the back, you have the mater, which is an information disk that you can use to kind of tell what date it is, and an alidade, which is a ruler that you use to line up with the sun to make sure you've got everything lined up. And it's all kind of, it looks kind of complex, but if you go to the British Museum, or you go to their blog right here, the British Museum has just opened an exhibit on the artifacts from the Islamic world, and part of it is astronomical tools and scientific tools and astrological tools. And they've put up a very interesting blog with a video walking through how to use an actual astrolabe. So I thought the concept of an astrolabe was very interesting because the people who developed an astrolabe didn't know how to get to the stars, but were basically envisioning where things would be over time. And that's what we're trying to do with our view of enterprise architecture, is show the organization where we're going to be, not just today, but in the future. And as I told you, when we started this, our goal was to, by the time of this presentation, to actually have that tool launched. But due to politics, due to technology, we only have a piece of it launched, and I'll talk about that. So how can we make an enterprise architecture astrolabe? Well, the plates, that's the city map. That's what I'm going to show you what we've got here called the enterprise city map. That's our view of architecture. It's based on a framework, not a TOGAF or anything like that, but something that comes from the California state government that we've kind of adapted to our own needs to make a very simple view of everything that Mozilla can do. The REIT, the pointers on the astrolabe, we could change colors, perhaps, as we move forward in time to show the evolution of things that are the capabilities that are captured in the map. The mater, the information disk on the back, as we see the progression of time, we can see how our business model is evolving. When we get to the point where instead of a desktop business model, that perhaps we have again, we don't even know what our next business model is going to be, but if we have this freemium business model that we're looking at right now, we're selling VPN services, we could adjust that on the back. So here's from the time when our model is much more based on subscriber services, and here's what, if we look at the plates, here's what our architecture and our capabilities are going to look like at the time. That's the goal there. And the ruler, of course, is just a simple way to show time. The ruler, we know that we have a time axis that we're progressing on. So let's take a look at what those plates look like, what the enterprise city map looks like. This is the highest level view that we have, the big, wide view of everything that Mozilla does. What we've captured here in just simple blocks, because neither me nor my partner Josh Howard are particularly artists, but we wanted to give something that is visual and shows what we're doing. Here we've laid out at the top level all of our sort of enabling capabilities, our support capabilities, our core capabilities, and our users, trying to identify who everything is. We've set the users as a non-capability area, but we wanted them identified on here. And then we've drilled down on each of these into different lines of business. The lines of business roughly correspond to our organization, but they don't have to correspond to the organization. That's what's really important about the architecture we've created. Mozilla likes to reorganize a lot. We like to move people around. We like to change the titles of our departments and things like that. But changing those things, changing those HR structures, doesn't change the nature of what we do. So we're trying to create a view independent of structures, but importantly, not independent of people. Everything in here has a person associated with it. So we break them down into, like in the support capabilities, and we have our finance, we have our workplace people, and then the one that we know best, of course, being technologists, are our enabling capabilities, our business technology, infrastructure engineering, and our data. So it's just a very high-level view of everything we do. And then the goal of our Astrolabe is to actually be able to create more layered views of this. So we can drill in, like if we drill into business technology management, or any of the sort of information capabilities, we can then see more of, we get into each of those capabilities that was listed, like enterprise service management or enterprise content management, and within each one, we see all the products that enable that capability. So with communication and collaboration, we have messaging, profile services, discussion, conferencing, productivity. Some of these things get into kind of gray areas, like conferencing. Yeah, that's a collaboration tool, but that's also a media or video tool, which we have covered in another part of the architecture. And then we could even drill further down into these. Behind each of these high-level products are a number of more specific products and services that enable it. One thing to keep in mind with this, and I'll talk more about this as we go forward, is that, let me go back here real quick. With capabilities, so when we go back to this first view here, we have the capabilities. We try to keep a 3-year, the goal of our enterprise architecture team is to have a 3-year view of where all of these things will be. So this is a current state view right now. We have color codes here based on the levels of maturity of each of those capabilities. And what we want to do is have this same view a year, 2 years, and 3 years into the future at this high level, where we understand some of these capabilities, how they're going to grow and change. Some of them are going to go away. One thing with Mozilla is we're not ever going to grow very much as an organization. We have about 1,000 people right now. It's going to stay that way. So to create new capabilities, we end up having to get rid of old ones. We're not able to support them anymore. The products, when we drill down into this level, we want the product teams to have a 1-year roadmap to know pretty specifically where they're going to be a year from now. We're actually in our strategic planning process right now, and product teams are looking at where they're going to be, like I said, 1 year from now and how they're going to get there. And then services, which are underneath this, are considered to be more kind of reactive and day-to-day, and service owners are kind of responding to what's happening throughout the business. Everybody feeds into that process and rolls up into it, but it's the capability owners that have the 3-year view, the product owners have the 1-year view, and the service owners have the day-to-day view of what's happening with their work. Most importantly, though, enterprise architecture is people. It's people, like Soylent Green, right? So behind all of these things are people doing the work, people making these happen, people working together. We did enable one part of the Astrolabe before we got here. We have I was able to kind of, I don't want to say subvert because it was actually came up from somebody on the team, but we are doing some work with with ServiceNow to do some service management. That project kind of derailed, but in the midst of that project, somebody said, hey, we could do the city map in ServiceNow. And I was like, yes, you can. So we were able to launch, actually, just since I left the state, so sometime in the last week, we were able to launch in ServiceNow an active view of our enterprise architecture where people can go in and look at everything that's there, understand who the people are, who manage the capability, who manages the service, who manages the product, who has an association with it, a dependency, a relationship on the product. So that's there right now. And we're trying to figure out how to create a future state view within ServiceNow. That was our goal, was to have an application with a future state view by now, but we just were never able to get traction on that before this conference. So again, every capability, product, and service has an owner and associates, and every team is empowered to create the long-term vision and to roll that up to the other teams. The product owners create the vision of where they want to be, and that's the capability owners, of course, have to accept that, but we all kind of work together, and it's a team, as teams are working together to get to support all these things in a way that lines up with our mission. So in order to capture future state, though, this is where we ran into the big challenge. The city map needs to be a time-based view. For it to be worthwhile, we need to be able to see in the city map where we're going to be a year from now and 3 years from now. The capabilities, like I said, 3-year vision, products are a 1-year vision. But what we found is that until we create space for imagination, we can't really make future state views. When we went out there and started working with all the different organizations at Mozilla and said, hey, what do you want to be doing a year from now? What do you want to be doing 3 years from now? What we heard over and over is, I can't even think about what I'm going to do tomorrow. People are so overloaded and so overwhelmed with the day-to-day work that we have. So it's changed our job to be more, we wanted to lead into this imagination, but we're also having to find opportunities for efficiency within the work we do now. Find places where things are duplicated, where we can take things off of somebody's plate and give it to somebody else, or share things so we can create some headroom so people can actually breathe and start to imagine. If you don't have room to breathe, if you're not able to slow down and imagine the future, you can't create a future state view. So that's become probably the biggest obstacle that we've had to face. So with that city map, our Astrolabe to the future, how do we use this to guide our journey? Let me talk about how we're going to create the future for Mozilla. There's 5 things that we consider the foundations of innovation. We start with trust. You need to have trust in order to innovate. If you don't have trust, people are going to try things and they're going to fail. They're going to be afraid to admit they're failing, or they're not even going to try something because they're afraid they're going to lose their job. They're afraid they're not going to get their bonus. We have a bonus structure at Mozilla that's a pretty significant part of people's salary. And if they don't trust the process, they're not going to try something because it might interfere with their ability to get the bonus. But we start with a foundation of trust at Mozilla. It's because of our shared mission. We're all out there trying to make the web better. So I know that whenever I'm in a room or a meeting with anybody at Mozilla, that we all have this common value. And that gives us that initial sense of trust. You have to be able to share, of course. Everything we do is out in the open, so everything is shared by default. We share in person at our all-hands meetings twice a year. All of Mozilla gets together somewhere in the world. This December it'll be in Orlando. But that's one way we do it, is that interpersonal thing, which is so important to us, to have that personal relationship. Everything's out on GitHub. We use a system called Discourse for internal discussion, and we also use Slack and other collaboration systems as well. So we have multiple ways to share. Sometimes too many ways to share, so you don't know if you're sharing with the right people, but we're starting to sort of standardize around Slack. Everybody seems to like Slack, even though people say they hate it. Everybody kind of keeps coming to it, so it's working for us as a sharing tool. You have to be able to experiment. And experiment is not just, I've heard too often where experimentation is a buzzword for, I'm going to put this thing on my sprint, it's going to be an experiment, and that's kind of a buzzword for, maybe it'll get done, maybe it won't, but I'm not going to be held to it. That's not the way we look at experiments. The way we look at experiments is much more scientific. You need to have a hypothesis. It needs to be grounded in reality. I really resonated with, I forgot the name of the guy who did the chaos engineering talk yesterday, but I really resonated with the steady state hypothesis. You have to know where you're headed, and you have to be able to measure it from a steady state of where you're at today. If there's too much chaos right here, you can't really experiment because you won't be able to tell what's working or not. So we actually have a thing, we do a program in Mozilla called the Culture of Experimentation, and about 10 people go through it every month and then spread those skills out. And that gives us ways of thinking and evaluating to create that foundation for rigorous experimentation. As I mentioned before, you need space. You have to have headspace in order to innovate. If you are completely stressed out about operating the systems that you have today, that you're spending 100% of your time just trying to keep things up, you're never going to be able to envision where you want to go in the future. Maybe you'll get lucky, maybe you'll have a dream and something will pop up in the middle of the night from your subconscious, and that's fantastic. But we actually need space to be able to think about it and breathe into these things. And this is something we've had trouble doing at Mozilla, and I think every tech company has trouble with. Some of our teams do offer 10% time, but it's not consistent. It's not a unified practice around the organization. So the quest for space is one of the things that I'm pushing very hard at Mozilla as we try to change to a culture of experimentation. And of course, you need to be able to reflect. Innovation means thinking about what you did, what worked, what didn't work, which you can do in blogs. In lunch, we have these really rich lunch tables at the different Mozilla offices. We can do an impromptu video meetings. We also have a ongoing sort of personal development sessions called Tribe, where people get a chance to reflect on their work and what they've been doing. So getting to the whole meat of why we need an Astrolabe to guide innovation, our business model needs to evolve. As I mentioned, the desktop browser has been the core of Mozilla. It's been the core of our identity. We are not a software company that makes Firefox. I need to emphasize that. Sometimes you need to emphasize that to people within Mozilla. We are not a software company that makes a web browser. We are a mission-driven organization that creates a piece of software that manifests our mission, that is one manifestation of our mission. Firefox represents the beliefs that we have in the internet. It represents a way of making people feel empowered, safe, and independent on the web. But our goal is not just to create the best web browser. Our goal is to fulfill that mission, and that's very important. So it means that we are free to evolve into something else if Firefox isn't continuing to serve our needs as an organization. The new ideas, now, as I said, Firefox has plateaued. Our adoption rate is, like I said, we have 350 million users. I think it's like 60 million active users, something like that. Not quite sure what the numbers are. And they're all different. If you look at the different browser metrics out there, there's a variety of different ways of measuring it. One of the things that our mission comes into conflict sometimes with the desire to make money, because our primary source of revenue is search engine searches from within the browser. But we can't always measure those searches because, remember, privacy is number one. So a bunch of people are out there doing private browsing, and there's no way to know if they're using Firefox to do searches. So when we go to collect money from Google or from Microsoft or from whoever else we have a search engine agreement with, some amount of that money is, some amount of those searches we can't collect on because we can't measure them. It's one of the biggest challenges we face today. But the new ideas, so anyways, the browser is leveling off. We need to find more things to be able to sustain the mission, another way to create the revenue to keep us doing the work that we're doing. And the ideas for where we do that could come from anywhere. You know, we have 1,000 Mozilla staff, but a lot of us see ourselves as just being servants to a much larger volunteer community. And our volunteer community, depending how you measure it, is tens to hundreds of thousands. Some people even like to stretch it out to being petition signers, which can get us into the millions of people who are actually engaged with our mission. Any one of those people that's engaged with us in any meaningful way may have an idea for how we can move forward. So we need to be able to capture those and manage those in a reasonable way. And the thing with Mozilla is we're always evolving. Right now we're talking about this little crisis with the desktop, but a couple years ago you may have heard of Firefox OS. We put all this effort into Firefox OS, and ultimately that wasn't a way for us to go forward. We weren't able to make the type of revenue out of the Firefox OS we wanted. We did a big effort on Internet of Things that we pulled the plug on about 1.5 years ago because we just weren't able to get the traction there. So we're always trying these things, and we learned from each of those things. From Firefox OS, we learned a lot about how to reach the consumer market and how to sell apps to them or how not to sell apps to them. And we pull learnings from that and feed it back into our process. So it's innovation from experimentation that's going to drive Mozilla forward, ultimately. The culture of experimentation that I talked about, that seeds our innovators with techniques that give rigor to the experimentation process. So we're actually making hypothesis, selecting good samples, measuring the effects there. The culture experimentation cohorts give us an additional level of trusted support. So we have that basic level of trust, like I talked about from the mission. But to get into that deeper level of trust, you have to work with somebody. You have to be able to share some more of your feelings, some more of the things they're working on that are trying and failing. So the COE cohorts are one way we do that and build a deeper level of trust, which allows a deeper level of experimentation. And ultimately, those experiments are all aligned with the capabilities that we showed on the map at the beginning and are based on products and services that we offer. So how do we do it then? We've talked about sort of the concepts of innovation, the need for innovation. Well, we have a few different tools that we use and a few different techniques that go back and tie into our capabilities, tie back into our enterprise city map, and really show us how to go forward. So innovation is a game. That's a core concept for us, is that when you're trying to innovate, you're playing around. You don't necessarily know what's going to work, what's not going to work. So we have a few different games that we use to get people thinking creatively, to start the process. The first one I mentioned on there is this thing that we've used in a few different places called the Thing from the Future. Has anybody seen the Thing from the Future before? It's an awesome little card game. We've put this in all of our offices. And what happens with the Thing from the Future is you have 3 different concepts here. You have your description of the future, you have a description of an item, and you have basically a context for the item. And you draw one card from each and come up with some ideas. So, for example, and I want you to play along here. So think about this. In a free future, there is a news report related to farming. In a free future, there is a news report related to farming. What is it? What's that? Free meat for everyone. Free meat for everyone. Other ideas? Cows getting paid for their milk. Yes, freedom extends to everywhere. Yes. One more. What's that? No pounds for seeds? No patents for seeds. No patents for seeds. Absolutely. Great things there. Or we might have, in a feminist future, there is a public service announcement related to space. What is it?
Males occupying Mars. Too many males in the bar.
Too many males in Mars, is that what you said?
In the bar.
Too many males in the bar. Too many males in the bar. Yes, that could be happening. There are too many men in the bar. We need to balance that out. No men are allowed on spaceships. How about that's definitely something that could happen there. In a feminist future, there's a public service announcement related to space. One more. A woman should walk on the moon. Yes. Can you believe that hasn't happened yet? Kind of unbelievable. But we use the thing from the future as one way to just get us started. Thinking about things, throwing ideas around. It's a good lunch table conversation. It gets the imagination flowing a bit. People start shouting things out and everything. Every idea, whenever we're innovating, at that very beginning, at that brainstorming, everything needs to be a yes. Yes and. Yes and. We get the idea going and we feed everybody. We give everybody positive feedback so that they feel more open with coming up with more and more ideas. So that's one simple way just to start it. It doesn't necessarily get us further in our mission, but it gets the wheels turning. We do hackathons, and we're getting more and more into the practice of hackathons. And what we have found with hackathons, how many of you do hackathons in your organizations? Fantastic. It's becoming pretty much ubiquitous. What we have found at Mozilla is hackathons, a variety of different things come out of hackathons. We try to set them up. You have to do a little pre-work beforehand. We try to put enough structure out there so that people who really don't feel comfortable in a wide open free space can come in and actually put their work into something, have some structure around it where they can start filling the gaps. Some people like to color in a coloring book. Some people like to freestyle. Some people like to paint like Banksy. Some people like to do a freestyle like a Jackson Pollock and throw paint all over. And some people like to be like a Frida Kahlo, for example, drawing animals and people and things like that. So in the hackathon, if we look at a hackathon in an artistic way, we want to enable all those people to come and be able to contribute and to be able to move around in different projects. So hackathons are a great source for imaginative ideas that can feed back into what we're doing. And then the third thing that we have, a third game that we use, is what we call models of impact. And models of impact is fantastic. What models of impact is, I'll go into a couple slides here, is I think we hired a firm that came up with this for us, but working in conjunction with this firm, we came up with this game that we have a list of about 30 different ways that you can impact the mission. Impacting our mission could mean making people feel more comfortable creating their own web experience. It could mean getting people online in outer corners of the world, enabling people who are in limited bandwidth situations to participate on the web. It could be creating legislative change, net neutrality, for example. If you're in the U.S. and familiar with our net neutrality battle, net neutrality, the most recent net neutrality legislation that's been repealed for now, was actually crafted in large part with Mozilla. Mozilla working with legislators when there was this whole debate, and we helped find another way through. So legislative impact is the way we can have impact. So with models of impact, you have a list of about 30 different impacts. We also have a list of about 30 different ways of creating revenue. And revenue doesn't necessarily mean money. Revenue is fuel for our mission. So of course it can be money. We could be getting revenue through a freemium model, which is one thing we're pursuing pretty actively right now. We feel like we've discovered that a lot of people who use Firefox and come to Mozilla really want to they want to pay us. They want to give us some money. They want to subscribe to services from us. So you may have seen that last week we started offering a a VPN subscription service with a partner. So that freemium model, that's one way of creating revenue. Another way of creating revenue is just donations. Another way of creating revenue is or fuel for our mission is to empower a volunteer base that can bring something to life. So you can take a revenue model, just like in the card game, you take an impact model, you take a revenue model, and then you can this is where the enterprise architecture comes back into it, you can take a look at our city map, take a look at all the things that we do and pick out a couple of those capabilities. And we can brainstorm on those things. How can we do something with our capability of creating a user agent, our capability of creating an email program, our capability of creating a workspace? How can we take that capability, a freemium model, and the desire to stretch the web out into a corner of the world? How can we do something with that? So that's a deeper game. That's what models of impact is. So here we have impact model, revenue model, and other factors. I've taken the other factors out and put capabilities into it. This was developed by another team at Mozilla. And as we do often at Mozilla, I've freely borrowed that into our work and modified it to support what we're trying to do. We're an organization that's all about sharing and all about open sourcing things. So we repurpose things in different ways. So that's the high level of what models of impact is. And here's when to play it. We can simulate within constraints relevant to Mozilla. We can use it to build a project pipeline. We can use it to get alignment from different teams. So we have multiple people coming in from all the different parts of the organization, bringing in volunteers and whatnot, and we all start playing models of impact and coming up with ideas. And then I have a way that I've adapted the models of impact that works in the kind of a way I like to think. And this is what I call innovate like a DJ. Let me take you through this is the core process where we're using the capabilities to drive innovation forward. We start with understanding what we can do today. And just like a DJ, what can a DJ do today? Well, a DJ can play some records. He's got to know what his current capabilities are. So just like we have the city map that lists all the things we can do today, and a DJ has a box of records that lists what he can do today. And one example of a capability that we have is our workplace resource team creates these community spaces. Each of our offices, not every one of our offices, but a lot of our offices have these spaces that we've created that are open for the community to come in and have meetings. Like we host a lot of meetups in the Portland office. The San Francisco office has a dedicated room that people can come in and play around with technology. And that capability of the community spaces is actually captured on the city map. So this is going to be a real world example that I use. Then we think about where are we going? What are the capabilities we're going to have in the future? You know, the DJ will look at the music charts or music magazines so he knows what records are coming out, or he'll grab a new synthesizer, a new technology and so I've got my existing record. I've got my, Voodoo Ray by a guy called Gerald from back in the early 90s. So I've got that little sound, but I also know that there's Cardi B might have a new riff she's going to come up with, and I'm going to want to be able to mix that in. Similarly, we look at the things that we're going to be able to do in the future. We want to know our next hits, and we want to archive the ones that we're done with, put them somewhere so that we can still find them when we need them, but we can get them back, but know that they're there. So in our world, we have that community space, and one of the capabilities that we have coming up is mixed reality and speech and language-based assistance. You may have even seen some of this. If any of you use Pocket, which is a browser extension that we have, Pocket just started doing where you can actually get the web read to you. So we've been creating our own voice assistant, our own voice API. We've also been creating mixed reality. We were doing a whole set of things like A-frame and different technologies around how to create 3D spaces. So we have the WPR, the community spaces. We have mixed reality. How can we impact the mission? What do we want to do with these things? So the DJ is trying to figure out, do I want the crowd to dance? Do I want them to go get a beer? Do I want them to go home? In our case, one of the things that we want to do to impact our mission, we want to improve social and economic mobility for often marginalized groups and individuals. So what can we do? We research the things we want to do, we consider our impact models, and we remix our capabilities. We imagine how we can put them together, just like a DJ might mix together a couple records. And what we've come up with here, we've made a remix, we've made it into a product, and what we came up with is something called XR Studio. And XR Studio is a space in our San Francisco office, in our community space, where we invited, over the summer, women and non-binary, people of non-binary gender to come to San Francisco and be a part of a cohort learning how to design new virtual reality spaces in the San Francisco space. So XR Studio became a remix of our current capability, this new capability that's hot, this mixed reality, and impacting the mission. We put that together. We started spinning the record like my favorite DJ here, the Black Madonna, she's doing. And then we took a look. Did it succeed? In this case, yes. We've had great success out of that. And now we've created a cohort of people from marginalized communities who understand how to do mixed reality. And now we can learn from them and bring that cohort back into here and do something new with them, create new ideas with them, move forward. But if it hadn't worked, maybe we would have just learned that our community spaces are usable or not usable in a particular way. So this is how we innovate like a DJ. We know what we can do, we look at where we want to go, we look at how we want to affect the crowd, and then we try it, and then we reflect on it, take those things, feed them back in, put them back onto the city map, and continue to evolve the city map and continue to look at our enterprise architecture in that way. And that's the process that this is one of several innovation processes we have. If any of you are involved in design, it's also similar to the design wheel process. But in order to make this all work, I know I've heard this a lot this last couple days. It's been wonderful to hear about people talking about people being the most important factor. People are the most important factor. All of these things come back to people. And I think it's taken a long time for those of us in technology to really start learning that and bringing people back into it. We used to think we were separating. We were creating technology that would separate from people and remove people from the equation, just be able to automate supply chains and things like that. Well, those days, as we're seeing, those things are done, and now it's time to really get back into thinking about people. And people are everything. We've learned a lot at Mozilla. First of all, we're open source. Everything we do is open. But the people we hire, we have 1,000 employees, and there's not a college degree in open source. Maybe there is in a couple universities. Maybe Ravensburn has one. But it's not, people aren't coming out of college with that degree. They're not going into the workforce with that. Most of the people I work with have never worked for an open source organization before. So they're like, yes, I want to be open. But when it actually comes down to it, and they're writing code, and it's like, wait, you want me to commit my code into a public repository? And you want me to notify the whole web that I've done this? Like, yep, that's what we're doing. It's a stretch. So it takes openness and collaboration. It takes trust. That's going to be okay. You're going to put it out there. And it also means we have to build trust with our communities too, which that's been a challenge because, as we all know, as we've seen in many high-profile things that have happened over the last couple years, the web is not just full of friendly, collaborative people. Most of us are, but there's a few people out there that just want to shoot people down. And if you've ever committed to a public repository and gotten back a comment like, this sucks, or this won't work, I mean, yeah, it might make you mad, but it also hurts you a little bit. So that we've had to work through those processes a bit. The community participation guidelines help. Healthy teams take risks. Toxic behavior is contagious and cancerous. We've had to root some of that out within our organization where people are like, no. Where you have the people that are standing in the way of people, or people who are being, who are discriminating against others in different ways. But when you have a healthy team, every healthy team is a learning and teaching team. And learning and teaching and sharing is so essential to creating the future. So 3 things I tell people are, hire people that stretch you and empower them. Work for leaders who will advocate for you. You should always go work for somebody who will advocate for you. You want your manager should be trying to get you promoted all the time. That should be his goal, her goal, their goal. And you should look for openness, collaboration, and spirit in the people that you hire. So finally, we've gotten through this process. We're starting to innovate. We're playing around a little bit like a DJ at Mozilla. Our future's bright, yeah. The enterprise architecture gives us a map to the future, but only if we have time to envision that future, if we have time to imagine it. If we don't have that time, we can't create that map. And that's the challenge that we've faced in the time from when I proposed this presentation until now. That's been kind of the biggest challenge I've seen is we haven't been able to think about it. We haven't been able to get there. We want to create the map to help get there, but we got to be able to envision that. Market pressure is threatening our space to innovate. This is where I talk about, like troubles we're having with, with the browser adoption and things like that. We do need to keep revenue coming in, to keep paying people, to keep the mission going forward. And if we're not able to do that, we're going to lose our capability to even support the things we do today, much less think about the future. So we have to respond to that in some way. Innovation is becoming a daily practice at Mozilla. People pull out the future, the think from the future all the time. People will pull out their different design toolkits and things and work with them. So we're really starting to ingrain that into our culture, and that's helping. Technology will not save us. Technology will not save us. We just have to emphasize that over and over. Technology can help us, but it is not the savior. People will save us. We need new ideas from what we're calling the net native generation. Too often we'll sit in a room where we're being leaders and we'll look around and be like, wait a minute, we're all like 45 years old. You know? And it's great, but we have a kind of a limited age perspective at that point. Younger people and older people have different lived experiences in different contexts. And the net native generation, the people who are younger, who have basically had internet from the time they've been able to walk, they have a new way of looking at the world. We need to bring some of those ideas and bring some of that color into what we do. And it's all about people. We always ask ourselves, are we open yet? We're an open source company. Whenever we're not being open in the work we're doing, whenever we're not serving the mission, we run into issues. Are we open yet? And what I want to know is, have we gotten to the point where we can now innovate like DJs? And we can in parts, but that's something we're learning. So thank you very much for coming to my talk. I'm Michael Van Kleeck, MVK at Mozilla.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a music podcast linked here. Developer.mozilla.org, that's MDN. If you'd like to contribute, it's one of the easiest places to contribute. And hey, come join this interesting ride. Mozilla's always hiring. Jobs.mozilla.org. So thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Time for some questions. Yes?
You mentioned your 10% space. Is that when
Yep.
all this innovation happens, or is that part of your normal?
That's one place where innovation can happen. And we don't have 10% space as a standard. We're aware of it because, you know, a lot of people in Mozilla are from, you know, other companies in the Silicon Valley that have it. But it's not a standard practice. But that's one place where innovation can happen. My experience is that, like, I don't have the 10% space, for one. So my experience is a lot of it happens in sort of casual conversations. The all hands are a great spot where we're all together for a week and we have that time to kind of share ideas. The lunch tables are important, but one of the things with Mozilla is that only about 50% of Mozillians actually work in a Mozilla office. So if we only do innovation around our lunch tables, we're only tapping into half of the organization. So we have to figure out more ways to create the space. 10% is one way. Dedicated hackathons, dedicated hack days are another. No meeting Fridays have become standard practice in some places, and that gives people headspace too. So, other questions? Yeah.
So, do you think you can learn from past success as well? Because Firefox browser changed the sort of internet good.
Yes.
In the past. It was very popular. We've had some unpopular things.
Yep.
Are you looking back as well as forward?
We're always looking back to what worked, and we talk about Firefox. It's interesting because one of the things that I think made Firefox successful, and I've been trying to raise up as an issue, is that actually what we were kind of born from was you know, when the Internet Explorer and Windows, the binding, and then the antitrust ruling on that basically forced us to be able to force them to allow us to install. Now we're trying to look, is that a way that we can get on? That's one place where we were, legislative, we were successful. So maybe we can repeat that success now when we're in a world of, closed platforms in your pocket. We can look at, what was it that made, why did people come to Fire? We're always looking back and trying to understand. But the thing is, we didn't capture, we weren't as rigorous years ago in capturing why things worked as we are now. So often Mozilla has been a culture of, let's try it and move forward. Let's try it and move forward. We throw something out there. One of the contentions with Firefox OS that some people have said is that Firefox OS was actually successful. We just weren't patient enough. Firefox OS there's a variant of Firefox OS that has become very popular on mobile phones in South America and India. And so people look at that and they're like, well, did we just give up on it too soon? So we haven't had enough rigor, but we look back anecdotally and try to understand what made things successful, and of course what made things fail. And so often what made things fail is when we did something that, this is the thing with like the freemium model we're doing right now with the VPN. So often when we tried to look like we were being commercial or tried to ask people for money, we got slapped back by the community. Like, no, you can't do that. You need to be ideologically pure. Well, something's changed in the market, because what we see now when we're out there offering this basically co-branded VPN service, our initial feedback on that has been uniformly positive. That people are like, yes, Mozilla, we know that you're getting too much of your money from Google right now. We want to find ways that we can give you money. Consumers want to help us to break that. So that perspective has changed. So even though that had failed in the past, and it's something else when we talk about past failures. Was anybody familiar with Mozilla Persona? It was our attempt to create kind of a unified web identity. And this is another one of these things where maybe we pulled the plug too soon. Or maybe we didn't do it in quite the right way. It was this distributed way of managing identity on the web. But I remember the first time I met our CEO was I started Mozilla 2 years ago, right as Persona was being basically unsupported and released. It's still out there. People can run Persona, but Persona requires a lot of infrastructure. And anyways, talking to Chris about Persona, Chris said at the time, just because it failed doesn't mean we shouldn't try again. And then I asked him, well, should we try again? He's like, no, not right now. It just failed. But then I asked Chris the same question about a year later. And he's like, yeah, I think the market's asking for it now. So now we're coming back with, if you use Firefox, some of you may have a Firefox account. And a lot of the technology that underlies Firefox accounts is the same technology that underlied Persona. So maybe we were too soon in the market, maybe we were too soon at abandoning it. So we try to look back at the things we've done as well. Now, in my view here, it's an interesting question, because it's only just now occurred to me that the city map, we only take a present and future view. We would have past views, and we'll be able to see how we evolve from those past views, but we never really consider the past. So thank you for making me think about that. Other questions? Yes.
It is related to what you said about doing the block too soon.
Uh-huh.
In terms of IoT,
Yes.
you mentioned that it's gone, but is definitely gone?
No, so here's another one of these things where we had one particular effort around IoT, one particular team that was working in a particular way, and they were based in certain parts of the world, and that team was never able to. They created some devices that were supposed to manifest the mission, but that didn't look like a success for us. We had, again, this was when I was first starting, we had some devices that team had created, like we were going to actually OEM some hardware, but then we realized we couldn't really do that. So we ended up pulling the plug on that whole IoT effort. It was reported pretty widely in the tech press when that happened in January of 2017. But now we've got a new connected devices team. So we're back into that space again, but exploring it in different ways. Our first take on IoT was our way to be there was to create devices, but that's not our way to be there. Our second way of thinking about it was to create like an open API or open technologies on the IoT space. But even that seems, we're an organization of 1,000. So it can be that we have to be careful what fights we pick sometimes. Like in Voice Assistant, we are gaining tractions. For example, in Voice Assistant, we have maybe 15 people working on voice. Amazon, if they want to do something new on Alexa, they can put 3,000 people on it like that, which is 3 times the size of our group. So yeah, we're back in connected devices and trying to understand that. One place where we're really where we feel like we might be able to sort of set the tone again. We talked about the things that made us successful in the past. A lot of times we've been able to be successful in the past when we've created like the Rust language. We created a new programming language and people have come to that. When we've been able to get there first and set the tone, we've been able to be successful. So distributed web is something that we're really into right now, and that's beyond blockchain, but the idea of having decentralized web and what we're going to do with that. So that's a place we're at right now. So connected devices is part of it. But it's a different look than what it was when it was sort of IoT and looking at like the Mozilla alternative to a connected house, that we just couldn't get there with the people that we had and the capabilities that we had at the time. Yes?
How much do things have to be commercially viable?
Well, for us, it just has to be enough. We have to be able to continue to sustain our work, but we don't have to make a giant profit. So.
Some profit, or do you say this one will offset that one, and how do you figure that out?
That's always a fine balance. We never, if we have something that could create more revenue than it costs for us to put into it, like we do right now basically with the browser. Maybe 600 people out of our 1,000 are working on the browser, but the browser creates 90%, so 60% of our workforce, but 90% of our revenue roughly. And I'm just kind of guessing at those numbers. So we can take some of that money to do things like, our open innovation team is out there doing education efforts, reaching out, building communities, which are things that, we know that they'll impact our mission, right? If we have thousands of people in student groups in India, and we know at some point that those Indian students that are learning about the open web from us are going to contribute back to the ecosystem, but there's no profit there. There's no commercial gain for us in supporting the reps councils out there. So we don't have to be profitable on we as an organization don't have to be profitable. We just have to break even. The Mozilla Foundation that owns us only wants us to sustain.
So like IoT,
Mm-hmm.
to understand how you get some money out of that.
Exactly. And that's why our first attempt at tuning these devices, we just couldn't get there. So now in the things that we're trying to do now, which I'm not really privy to all the things we're doing, if we're doing protocol work there or what we're trying to do, I know we're doing some privacy work, but I don't know if it comes out of our IoT team. Like the Mozilla Foundation is doing a thing on, every year they're doing a gift guide. So if you're looking at buying connected devices this year for your family, take a look at our gift guide because we've evaluated a bunch of different ones on privacy. But we're not offering a solution. We're not out there giving the privacy guide and saying, hey, buy Mozilla branded X. And we're also not getting money from the people that are doing good privacy. They don't care that we're out there saying, oh, you do a good job in privacy. Maybe they do. Maybe they use it to sell their product, but they're not paying us for it. So it's been one of the, I spent 22 years, I've been in tech for 20 years before I was at Mozilla, and everything was always about bottom line, profit. Everything had to be able to make money. At Mozilla, we just have to sustain. So it changes the equation, changes the ability, changes the spaces we're able to play in. All done? All right. Thanks, Andrej. Thank you, everybody.